This is a bit shocking. We have reports that an aircraft of some kind has just now crashed into one of the World Trade Center buildings.
We were up playing cards in our room, and so we all went, wow, man, there's something going on here, because a second plane just hit the other tower.
An explosion in the second, no, that's a second plane.
Wow, what the hell's going on?
I know it was the States, but I still feel like it's North American soil, and I feel like that's a part of us.
Unbelievable.
Oh, my God.
I was upset, and I just wanted to make it right somehow. It's go time.
The Americans are our allies, closest allies we have. Well, we need to help them out.
Hundreds of soldiers are leaving wives and children behind. They are bound for Afghanistan, Canada's first official combat mission in a half a century.
We actually loaded up our magazines with live rounds. Now you know it's something a little different. They said, well, we're flying you right into Kandahar airfield. We'd seen it on TV, so it was all very surreal.
When we came in, we had to do evasive maneuvers with the aircraft. That kind of stuff would get your adrenaline going. You're coming in pretty fast just due to the threat of surface-to-air missiles. That phrase that I used, it's go time, it really felt like it. It felt like opening the Bible and looking at some biblical time 2,000 years ago. It was like the moon.
The door opens up, the ramps open up, and all you see is essentially desolation.
That first step onto the tarmac, you knew you were in a war zone. It looked like it. So it was kind of an awakening.
When we first got off the plane, the American military, they looked fit. These kids were all like California guys and tanned and 19, 20, and 21. Most of us were like late 30s and 40s. And they were just looking at us like, who are these? Why do Canada bring all these old men to fight?
The very first Coyote that rolled off the C-17 when it landed had a I Love New York bumper sticker on the front of it. And when the Americans saw that, it almost reduced them to tears. And in fact, some of them did cry. So here are these big, hardened soldiers, really appreciating that kind of sentiment, that we were all, brothers in arms, and we're working with them to help right wrong that had been done to them. The operation to essentially clear the Shah-i-Kot Valley. The special forces had been chasing a bunch of al-Qaeda elements through the foothills of the Hindu Kush Mountains, where they were trying to escape into Pakistan, and so they were trying to cut off their escape routes into Pakistan.
We were all like fantasizing, basically, like it'd be cool that if a Canadian group caught bin Laden.
Once we got told that we were going to go, your adrenaline starts pumping and you get excited.
After having received orders, I'm walking out there with the rest of the platoon, loaded to the gills with ammunition and water. And the Padre was giving blessings, and our faces were camouflaged. 12 Chinooks spool up their engines, and away we go. For a guy who just left Edmonton a couple months earlier, was quite a thing.
Actually, right across from me was a Delta Force sniper. He looks at me and goes, who are you guys with? And I said, we're Canadians. And he kind of just looks at me and kind of gives me a nod. And he said, we're going into a hornet's nest.
And we were all looking at each other saying, what the hell's going on here?
You got to remember now, these are crazy mountains, so we're doing some amazing flying. And then all of a sudden they stop, and the ramp goes down, and the load master, the guy at the back that controls us, he says, all right, get out. The first intelligence estimate was that there were probably somewhere between 40 and 60 Al-Qaeda fighters. That gave a lot of guys pause because it would have meant very close, very personal, close combat. You know, this could be a real dodgy operation.
American B-52s continue to pound Al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters from high in the sky, while ground troops try to cut off their escape routes. But these mountains on the border with Pakistan are a tough place to fight.
Our job was going up there and searching the whole area for any Taliban. We would basically search and destroy. If we found anything, we'd if a Taliban, we'd shoot them and kill them. Any things that we found, like equipment-wise or caves, our mission was to actually blow the hell out of them.
We never experienced anything bigger than fleeting shots from these people. They were using sort of quintessential guerrilla tactics. So we contacted them, but we never really saw them. So we would get shots taken at us. We'd hear that they were, you know, somewhere, so we'd go look for them, and they disappeared by then.
Colonel Stogren said, "We think snipers might help." I had a good sniper section, or a good couple of snipers in that organization.
Colonel Strogan told us that we're going to be deploying in support of a special operations task against the Taliban in the Shah-i-Kot Valley.
That they put the snipers essentially to provide overwatch on on the companies down below, and essentially to act as cutoffs. You know, if the Al-Qaeda were trying to get out or get in, either on foot or in vehicles, the snipers could interdict them.
What a sniper does, they travel by themselves, and they're given an area to watch over. And they usually travel in either two-man teams. In the two-man teams is a sniper, and then the spotter.
We had our orders, and we had our map with our outline of our area of operation. There was a box which we were to operate in and not go out of. The reason for this is engagement by friendly aircraft. Because we couldn't engage these guys from the position we were in, we made the decision to move outside the box. We knew the risk that would come with that.
If the Americans were getting shot at or anything like that, the sniper would try and find the target and then eliminate the targets.
Got yours?
They made quite a few kills.
In the following days, we identified a three-man team, one of which were carrying an RPK, so it's a light machine gun. And that was identified as the target we'd engage. First round, we shoot at this guy, and no real reaction. They kind of stop, look around. Those type of ranges now, because we're out past that 2,400 meter mark, not much of a reaction from them. Make an adjustment from Tim. Fired a second shot. I think he hit his bag. Don't change anything. Breathe. Rack another round. Send another round downrange, which made its impact. Target drops. There's no celebration. It's work. We later learned that the shot that we took at 2,430 meters was indeed a world record for a kill mating in combat by a sniper.
I think you could see the elation in everybody's face coming back, and that they looked their fears or their doubts in the eye, a feeling of victory kind of thing, that we managed to pull it off.
They saved a lot of American lives. The Americans were very, very happy with the Canadian snipers. That's when we got back. That's all the Americans talked about was our Canadian snipers. They made the Americans realize that the Canadian forces, the Canadian military, is an actual force to be reckoned with, and what they did up there.
The Canadian troops say that their mission was successful. Al-Qaeda was cleared from these mountains, but leaders warn there is more danger ahead.
We went to Tarnak Farms to do some more training. It was an old training ground for the Taliban, for Al-Qaeda, Taliban. You know, the videos of them doing their little jumps and twirls and shooting.
When we got there, we used it as a training facility too. We took over and used it as a rifle range and a live fire range so we could get ready to go off on some of our missions.
We were out on the range on Tarnak Farms, and we were supposed to engage some ruined Soviet tanks, targets that were off in the distance. We had a fixed position on a wadi, so it was like a very big ditch, and we were on the lip of that ditch, firing at the old Soviet tanks.
The sections were rotating through, and then it was our turn. Grenade! And it just started out normally, as it was supposed to. The firing was happening, and it was going well. No issues, really.
I was firing a Carl Gustav, sort of like a rocket launcher. It's a shoulder-fired weapon. That was the #1 on it. I remember yelling over at another guy, Private Green. I remember yelling at him, and as I was getting ready to fire my last round, there was a huge explosion off to my left.
I heard it coming in. I heard the whistling. I heard something. It was obviously a split second, but I was like, no way.
The blast went right through my body, hit him, and threw him down the wadi, and threw everyone else down the wadi.
The blast was, I can't even describe it.
And then there was nothing. I remember it being eerily calm. That quiet is something that's, you know, haunted me ever since it happened. It's a terrible experience. Just thinking you're alone and thinking you're about to die.
And I just remember looking at my hand, and obviously I was reaching down, I was touching my leg, and I just knew it was covered in blood, and that I needed help.
I tripped over someone in the dark there, and there wasn't much left, and you know, I didn't know what it was until I picked it up, obviously, and put it down. And I know what soldier who it was, but you know, there was just so much trauma.
I was asking, like going through my nominal roll in my head of my troops, if they were all okay. And I was getting a lot of positive answers. And I kind of remember not getting that response for Ricky's name, so.
And then helicopters started coming in, and we started loading. I was with Lorne, and I thought he was gone for sure, just the way he looked.
And I remember them walking down with me on the stretcher, and I don't know how I joked with them. I just said, "Don't drop me, you pricks."
I remember talking to him on the helicopter. I was holding his hand, and he was not responding to me whatsoever. He was so messed up. You know, he basically had minutes to live, I would say, you know. And just so happens the right people were in Kandahar that day that saved his life. A neurosurgeon from the United States military happened to be passing through. And because he was such a great doctor, he was able to do a lot of things that, for Lorne that day.
I'm saddened, quite frankly, beyond words to inform you that several of our troops were involved in a tragic friendly fire accident. An American F-16 fighter jet released one 500-pound bomb. 4 Canadian soldiers were killed and 8 injured. We will not forget these brave soldiers.
The investigation should soon yield answers as to how this tragic accident occurred. Friendly fire is not a new problem, and perhaps more likely when more than one nation's armed forces are on the battlefield.
If you were testifying, you could see them. You could see the American pilots. When I first saw Schmidt, there's a smug look on his face that I wanted to just rip off his face, like he was the victim. Umbach was totally different. When I looked at him, he looked remorseful. He looked like he had made a mistake. But Schmidt, when I saw him and looked him right in the eyes, I didn't see that.
From what I gather from the trial and from everything else is both these pilots were flying back from a mission.
The U.S. military today released several minutes of video and audio from the cockpit.
So they saw some flashing on the ground, so they turned their aircraft towards the flashing and flew over to investigate what it was. One of the pilots called in and said that they feel threatened.
He requested to open up on our guys with cannon fire, with his machine guns.
Request permission to lay down some 20 Mike. Stand by. Let's just make sure that it's not friendly, that's all.
He got denied.
Copy 5-1, boss man, hold fire, I need details.
And they were flying around still, and then he thought that they were being fired at again and declared self-defense and rolled in, as he called, rolling in self-defense.
Okay, I've got some men on a road, and it looks like a piece of artillery firing at us. I am rolling in self-defense. Boxman copies. Check master arm, laser arm.
What he was actually looking at was the backblast of my Carl Gustav. His crosshairs were on me, on my weapon system, and that's when he just hit the button.
Bombs away, cranking left. Shack. Boss man. Copy 5-1. Boss man, disengage. Friendly is Kandahar.
It was a 500-pound bomb. Big bomb.
Coming back left.
Through their recordings, you can hear them. They're like, well, I hope we did the right thing and that they were going to be under the microscope now.
I hope that was the right thing to do. Yeah, me too.
Kandahar Airfield is lit up like a Christmas tree. How could you come to that decision to drop a bomb without checking that 4 kilometers or 1 finger's width away from the biggest coalition base in southern Afghanistan? How could you not check?
The military judge's language was severe about Major Schmidt in particular, citing willful misconduct. But the conclusion was his actions were not criminal. There will be no court-martial.
Schmidt went back to his unit. He got a severe reprimand. Supposedly wasn't allowed to fly. But from what I've heard, I don't know if he has. I don't really care.
Do you think justice was served?
I don't know what would have been just. 10 years in jail wouldn't have changed a thing. You know, life goes on, and it has to.
I never got pissed off at the Americans once, because every time we went on any mission, we ever got in trouble, it was just one radio call and said, we need help, and there'd be an American fighter bomber helping us out like this in seconds. So you can't blame the whole American forces.
There are still many questions and very few answers. But today is a day of mourning as the fallen soldiers make their final journey home.
You know, the outpouring of support from the Canadian populace was just amazing. I was, buddies with them all. Mark Leger, Richard Green, Smith, and Ainsworth-Dyer. My personal problem with all that was I was extremely hard on Green. It was hard for me because the last thing he would have heard would have been me, jacking him up or yelling at him. So I felt very bad for that for many, many years.
Yeah. I was tasked with driving Rick's casket. Just kind of went back and just kind of chit-chatted with him for a few minutes.
What'd you say?
Basically wished him well. So we'll definitely see you again sometime.
Colonel Stogren got everybody together and said, all right, you may be angry, but the mission carries on. we very quickly, you know, put our emotions to the side and kept up with our mission. Yeah.
The United States, Colonel Frank Wyszynski, his attitude was, we are brothers and you are one of us. We're going to mourn together. We're going to memorialize these fine young men, and we're going to move on. And what other option is there?
Kandahar, the heartland of the Taliban. The first city the religious army conquered, and the last to fall when the US-led coalition brought their rule to an end. For decades, people here have known little but war.
Canadians asked for Kandahar, but they didn't actually, I don't think they actually realized how bad that was going to turn out to be.
I was talking to a couple of the foreign affairs guys, and I said, Kandahar, eh? That's going to be tough. And they said, really? Because we heard it's all good. It's not going to be that bad. I said, oh, yeah, I don't know who's telling you that, but that's a tough part of Afghanistan.
Now, a group of Canadian soldiers are returning to Kandahar province to rebuild and, if necessary, deal with any remaining insurgents. The first deployment of Canadians in Kandahar since 2002 will form a provincial reconstruction team, or PRT, soldiers, police, and aid workers.
When we took over from the Americans, the Afghans realized there was a different group in the people running this show now. So when we lowered the American flag, everybody thought we were going to put the Canadian flag up, and we said no. We put the Afghan flag up. And they looked at us, and the Afghans were looking at us like, where's your flag?
Everything we did was anchored on our development funding. In that year, Afghanistan became the largest Canadian aid program in the world, so there was a lot of money to program.
Glenberry was in charge. The ones that worked with him, we called him the professor, because he was very, very intelligent, very, very smart man.
His job was to extend the will of the central government of Afghanistan and Kabul out to the province and to get that message across to the local politicians.
We're going to leave the PRT and come down through.
They said, okay, you're going to do this PRT, Provincial Reconstruction Team. And that was the first time we ever did anything like that. There were aid people, like give aid to the towns.
I saw that mission as twofold. We were there to assist with reconstruction, but it was hostile territory. We were not wanted there by a lot of the people who live there and who know the ground, and so we were in danger every single day.
Whenever we went on patrol, it was usually 3 or 4 vehicles in a convoy. You couldn't accomplish anything inside the wire of the camp by just staying there. You had to get out and around and talk to people and show that you were there to assist and that you weren't afraid to get out and assist.
It's the beginning of a brand new mission in southern Afghanistan, and Canadian soldiers are facing new dangers. It's hard to know who is a friend or who is a potential foe.
I was Glenberry's driver. Driving in Kandahar, you're driving full bore. You're got a Mercedes G-Wagon. It's a great vehicle. It's fast. It's agile. There's no rules, no regulations. Just have fun. And there's sort of a Ben-Hur aspect to it, I guess.
We were always very aware of our security. Your head was on a swivel when you were in a vehicle. I mean, you were just looking constantly.
We're looking out for suicide bombers for number one, but sometimes the bad guys can use donkeys, donkey-borne IEDs. Sometimes it's a guy in a backpack. Sometimes it's a guy in a wheelbarrow. Sometimes it's a kid that wants just to throw a grenade.
One of the patrols, we just happened to stop at I don't even know if it was big enough to call a village. It wasn't uncommon when we first got there that people would retreat into their huts upon the arrival of a convoy, and we were fortunate enough to have a good group of interpreters with us.
I started working as an interpreter for Canadian Armed Forces when I was 15 years old. Till the end, you know, our neighbors didn't know where I was working. Being a woman in Kandahar and then working for a soldier, it's something that a prostitute will do. That's how Afghan sees it. It's a risky job.
So we'd have these shuras and all that, and we sit around.
What is a shura?
It's basically a meeting of people. We'd sit down there, and it's all on the rug, and we basically just sit there and talk. The oldest guy would talk first, and he'd say, this is what we need here. We need schools for our kids. We need this. We need protection, like that.
It's very important that the young kids see us as friendly people and not occupiers, because they're going to grow up and be adults pretty soon. And hopefully this generation will grow up without war. And that's the most important thing. That's why we want the kids to come close to us and talk to us and shake our hands.
First school we opened up for girls. I talked to some of these girls. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I was so fascinated with their answers they gave me. They wanted to be airline pilots, not stewardess. Airline pilots. They wanted to be the president of Afghanistan. They wanted to be the governor of the province. Their goals were amazing. And I looked at that and I said, that's how the war is going to end. I said, we're not going to win this war just by fighting.
So it was really going to be, you know, we use the term a 3D mission, so defense, diplomacy, and development. But somebody forgot to tell the Taliban that.
Kandahar was the cradle of the Taliban, its birthplace, its stronghold. The soccer stadium there had borne witness to executions, stonings, amputations as a result of Sharia law, all sorts of horror.
It was a really horrible and a brutal regime and the darkest day in the whole history of Afghanistan. And the people of Afghanistan will never, ever forget that time.
By 2006, when we got over there was already indications that there was probably more Taliban activity than we had anticipated. And the feeling we were getting was, okay, that this is supposed to be getting easier, and it's not, it's getting harder.
Taking advantage of U.S. withdrawal, insecurity increased greatly, and Taliban is reacting to that. But should we not have thought about that, and especially in Kandahar, because it is the heartland of the Taliban?
I was going in as one of the first two civilian police into the Kandahar Provincial Reconstruction Team. Our job as civilian police going into the PRT was to do a needs analysis of the Afghan National Police capacity in Kandahar province, and then decide what we could do to assist them.
The Afghan police was a mixed bag, from district to district, from town to town. Sometimes they weren't getting paid, sometimes they were corrupt. A lot of them demonstrated some pretty remarkable courage. A lot of them also demonstrated some horrific corruption and vices.
It came to my attention that police salaries were not being paid. It was being siphoned off. It was one of my local staff who made me aware. He said that, Nipa, you know, I hear this is happening. Maybe we should make a trip to the UN office and find out what they're doing. Unfortunately, you know, nobody paid attention.
The Afghan security forces, especially in southern Afghanistan, have a terrible track record of summarily killing and torturing Afghan civilians. And so when villagers were mistreated by Afghan security forces, in many places they blamed the foreigners, in some places the Canadians, who brought them there in the first place.
I think one of the main things that people sometimes go back to Taliban is injustice within Afghanistan. When they don't get justice by the government, that's when they go and ask the Taliban to do it for them. Taliban start coming back to the power. We thought they were defeated and they will never come back to Afghanistan, but we were wrong.
Well, we were well aware of security issues, right? I'd had security briefings, intel every day. We had security updates every day. And you knew there were issues, obviously, and that we were prone to attack at any given time.
I was told a couple of times by the guards that there are people coming and asking about you. You shouldn't be coming here. One time I was called, like, at the meeting by the Director of Women's Affairs, and she told me that, Mariam, I know you're a good girl, and we really need your help, but I also care about women here. He said, you're a child, and you don't know that you're at risk. That was the first time that my father realized that their daughter was at risk.
Canadian diplomats and aid workers have to reach out to the local populace, but the soldiers protecting them have to always be ready for attacks.
January 15th, 2006 started like every other day. You would know generally the night before, sometimes the morning of, what your mission was. My patrol group headed out to do what we call the presence patrol, which is exactly what it sounds like. We drive around the area and let our presence be known.
There was a patrol plan to Tactipol, small town, not that far away. And the mission of that was to go visit with the local government in the town. That was Glenn's primary responsibility that day.
Glenn Barry has his meeting on the way back, and we're just driving casually to our provincial reconstruction team site. And as we drive in through the city gates, we're fairly close in the vehicles. There's 4 vehicles in the convoy.
We were told that there's possible suicide bombers in Kandahar. We get that all the time in our reports. Possible suicide vehicles driving around Kandahar, white Toyota Corollas, or this type of vehicle, this type of vehicle. When you watch them, you're on pins and needles. You're like watching like every which way.
You always had your head on a swivel watching everything, and this was a difficult place to keep watching because there was so much activity.
And all of a sudden, Jeff, my co-driver, calls car right, and at that exact moment, I swerve as hard as I can left.
I remember just the feeling of this concussive wave coming at us.
And it lifts our vehicle up through the air, tumbling.
It was one of those things you couldn't believe it while you were watching it. It was corkscrewing through the air.
I pop out, my left leg's ripped off instantly, my right leg's destroyed, hands and face are on fire. My sergeant is on the radio, and he's saying, Paul's dying.
their patrol was hit by a vehicle-borne IED.
He's a suicide bomber.
Absolutely. Mr. Glenberry died instantly in that IED strike.
I remember every second. The pain, oh, the pain. It was like a chainsaw.
Jake Petton and one of my other corporals said, if we don't get rid of Franklin, he's gonna die.
2 Afghans start walking out of the crowd, right straight directly towards me, eyes locked on me. My buddy Jake Petton, he brings up his rifle and he's ready to shoot them dead. And then for whatever reason, he doesn't. So he brings down his rifle, and what they were doing was helping me. So they helped lift me up.
Just threw him in the front seat. And there was 2 sets of legs around the scene there. We grabbed the 2 legs and they just threw them on top of Franklin.
Paul came in first. Oh, he was talking and conscious. The first thing he wanted to know was, is everyone else okay? Because Paul was their medic. So that would be the first thing that he would want to know, is everybody else okay?
What did you tell him?
I said, you don't need to worry about that right now, Paul. We're gonna worry about you.
And she said, I heard someone lost a leg. And apparently, in a big dramatic swoosh, I take the blanket and I go, that was me. I lost both. So, medic humor.
I would like to think whenever a medical professional is treating someone, it's always their best. But when it's someone you know, someone you've worked with, you think about their family too. You think, I have to be able to send him home. The absolute need to have him go home is overpowering.
I knew that I had to make it. It was a matter of just no ifs, ands, or buts. I was going to make it. If I'm still alive now to think this, then I'm going to stay alive right to the end, and I'm going to stay alive and see my family.
Tragedy in Kandahar. A senior Canadian Foreign Affairs official was killed in the service of his country today by a suicide bomber. 3 Canadian soldiers and several Afghans were grievously injured in the attack.
A sad ceremony as a piper plays a final farewell to Glenberry, the Canadian diplomat who volunteered to come to one of the most dangerous places on earth, in the end giving his life to help Afghans rebuild their shattered country.
He paid the ultimate sacrifice.
At first,
His life.
you're almost numb because you're tied up in the events and what you have to do right then and there. And then you can start playing mind games, if you will, with yourself. Well, why did he pull out next to that vehicle, and why didn't it happen next to the vehicle I was in? The thoughts do go through your mind. Why Glenn? Why not me? Why am I still here when Glenn is not, and he was only 25 yards from me?
Did I give my legs to a future Afghan? I don't see it that way because I was protecting a diplomat. For me, my limb loss is about protection. So I was protecting a diplomat from an Islamic extremist, and I failed in my mission because he's dead.
Did you feel guilty?
Sometimes.
A day later, Canadian soldiers are going back outside the wire. They are going to continue their mission, but this time with a greater determination to ensure no insurgents get close enough to injure their comrades.
We looked at each other, me and Major Lutz, and said, you know what we're doing tomorrow? And we said we're taking patrols out tomorrow. Because if we waited a couple of days, they would have been too nervous to go out again. They carried on as normal.
Gunners, the extra vigilant in the turrets today, all right? And if it means get a point of weapon at somebody, point a weapon at somebody, all right?
How did that alter the provincial reconstruction team mission?
I think it was just greater resolve for us to do what we went there to do, to own that for Mr. Barry. I think it just strengthened our resolve to be there. We won't let this break us down.
The Canadians got a real shock with the death of Glenn Barry. But I think it was also part of a harsh education the Canadians were soon to get in just how violent Kandahar was going to be.
After that, my brother got kidnapped. That was really a bad thing. My brother was only 11 years old. Taliban were trying to get information from him. They tortured him very badly. That still, you can see, if you ever meet my brother, you would see the scars on his back or on his head. And they kept asking him who the lady is, what she's doing, and where her address is. But my brother never, ever told them that she was my sister. And then they released him after 3 days and stuff. And my brother was totally in a terrible situation when we got him. My family left Kandahar within 24 hours, and they moved. My father stayed with me in Kandahar because if we don't work there, how are we going to change Afghanistan?